Welcome to This Explainer. Think of this as your ultimate interactive study guide for understanding the massive cultural shifts in early America. Because if we really want to grasp how the modern American mindset was forged, we've got to look back at the original tug of war between two incredibly powerful forces, faith and intellect.
To really get a handle on this era, we need to establish our core theme right out of the gate. Think of it as a massive historic pendulum swing between intense religious faith on one side and strict scientific reason on the other. The colonists didn't just walk a straight line. Instead, the culture swung wildly back and forth. And by nailing down the key definitions and logical arguments behind each swing of this pendulum, we can basically decode the entire colonial era.
So, here is our roadmap. We're going to cover the Puritanical Society, the Salem witch trials, the Age of Enlightenment, the Great Awakening Revival, and finally, the impact on modern America.
Number 1. The Puritanical Society.
Okay, let's start with our very first key definition. The Puritans built their entire worldview on one unyielding premise. Human nature is inherently sinful. They believed people are literally just born sinners. So what's the logical conclusion of that? Well, they figured they required absolute, punishing discipline to fix that nature. Hard work wasn't just good for the local economy. It was an absolute strict religious requirement for salvation. Literally everything, from acting in a play to having a drink, was frowned upon or straight up outlawed because the whole society was engineered to enforce biblical teachings.
Number 2. The Salem witch trials. Now, this event brilliantly illustrates the terrifying breakdown of a society's logic. This wasn't just some sudden explosion out of nowhere, it was a steady escalation. In 1691, young girls start experimenting with what we'd basically call adolescent parlor games, baking a witch cake with an enslaved woman named Tituba. By early 1692, they start showing really odd behaviors. And this strict Puritan society, they need a scapegoat, so 3 highly marginalized women, a slave, a beggar, and an elderly woman, are arrested. From there, the hysteria absolutely snowballs. Over 100 people are jailed and 19 are hanged. It only stops in late 1692 when Governor Phipps's own wife is accused, which finally prompts the government to say, wait, this supposed evidence is completely unreliable.
Now, because pure supernatural witchcraft doesn't exactly fit into our modern scientific logic, historians look for rational arguments to explain the completely unexplainable chaos of Salem. Was it simply bored teenagers acting out in an incredibly repressive environment? Was it a calculated legal method for the community to attack non-conforming, postmenopausal women? Or maybe collective psychological fear from ongoing Native American attacks? Or, and this is a really fascinating theory, biological poisoning from ergot. That's a toxic fungus growing on a bad rye harvest that literally causes hallucinations. Any of these logical theories help us make sense of the madness.
Number 3. The Age of Enlightenment.
Reacting to the horrific tragedy of Salem, our cultural pendulum takes a massive, aggressive swing away from the supernatural and right toward intellect and science. We are pivoting entirely from the old world, where God determined your fate and unexplainable events were just the work of the devil, to a new Enlightenment philosophy. Suddenly, it's all about educational growth. Colleges like Harvard and Yale are established. And get this, by 1776, literacy rates in New England are so incredibly high that almost everyone can actually sign their own name instead of just leaving a mark. Human intellect and rational questioning are finally taking the wheel.
At the very heart of the Enlightenment is a concept that literally birthed the political framework of the United States: the social contract. This isn't about religion at all, it's a rational, transactional agreement between humans and their rulers. Let's break down the philosopher John Locke's exact logical argument step by step. Step 1, you, the citizen, agree to surrender some basic freedoms to a governing body. Step 2, in exchange, that government's sole job is to guarantee your natural rights, life, liberty, and property. But here is the absolutely crucial third step. If the government fails to secure those rights, the citizens don't just have the option, they have a rational duty to rebel. This incredibly structured logical argument is the exact framework Thomas Jefferson used to write the Declaration of Independence.
And this highly structured thinking wasn't just reserved for politics. It completely revolutionized science. Isaac Newton applied this exact kind of sequential, rigid logic to the physical world in his publication Principia. By establishing that objects in motion remain in motion and that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, he essentially stripped away the supernatural. This logical framework allowed him to mathematically predict the movements of the planets, the tides, gravity itself. The universe was no longer a terrifying mystery, it was just a predictable machine.
This huge scientific awakening led directly to a brand new theological concept: deism.
Think of deism as a worldview perfectly tailored for the Enlightenment. It argues that, yes, God created the world and set its physical laws in motion, kind of like a clockmaker winding up a clock, but then he stepped back. Under deism, there is absolutely no divine intervention. Therefore, the logical conclusion is that humans have to rely entirely on their own reason and intellect to eliminate evil and solve the world's problems.
Before we jump into our next section, I want to pose this study guide check-in directly to you. Based on the logic we just mapped out, from rising literacy and modern medicine to John Locke's social contract, what do you think is the Enlightenment's most lasting legacy today? Just hold on to that thought as we watch the pendulum swing once again.
Number 4, the Great Awakening Revival. Because as we know, a society can't survive on cold, hard logic alone. The pendulum reaches its absolute peak with Enlightenment reason and then swings rapidly back toward intense emotion, community, and personal faith. This era is kicked off by a massive ideological shift known as Christian rationalism. This was a really fascinating bridge. It rejected the old, gloomy Calvinist belief that salvation was predetermined and totally out of your hands. Instead, it focused on morality and free will. It actually gave individuals agency. You finally had a choice in your spiritual life, and this newfound freedom sparked a massive religious revival across all the colonies.
This ideological split between the old light and the new light is super crucial to understand. The old light represented the traditional, rigid, puritanical beliefs that demanded you sit quietly in a parish church. But the new light, that was the Great Awakening. The New Light movement argued that true religion didn't need a fancy building or an elite minister. It just needed passionate people. So they held these vigorous, highly emotional revivals outside, out in fields, encouraging a much more open and accepting religious experience.
The wrath of God burns against them. Their damnation does not slumber. The pit is prepared, the fire is made ready. Okay, that is terrifying, right? That's the preacher Jonathan Edwards. Edwards, along with others like George Whitefield, used this incredibly vivid, dramatic rhetoric to just completely bypass the cold logic of the Enlightenment. They wanted you to feel your faith, to focus on self-judgment. Their compelling presence attracted tens of thousands of followers, drawing these massive crowds that even included logical Enlightenment figures like Benjamin Franklin. Crazy, right?
And this massive wave of religious fervor had very tangible, real-world consequences. Because they were meeting out in fields and homes, it totally democratized society. It became a safe haven for the poor, commoners, women, and slaves. It entirely rejected that elite gentry culture. Plus, by refusing to attend the state-sponsored local parish churches, they were directly challenging governmental authority. They even went so far as to establish their own new colleges, like Princeton and Brown, just to train their own ministers. Basically, raw emotion led straight to social revolution.
Number 5, impact on modern America.
To wrap up our study guide, I want to leave you with a final test of the frameworks we've explored today. Think about this massive pendulum swing we've tracked, from the strict fear of the Puritans, over to the cold mathematical reason of the Enlightenment, and then all the way back to the passionate democratic fire of the Great Awakening. Why do you think society ultimately needed that massive emotional revival? And perhaps more importantly, when you look around our culture today, how is that exact same pendulum between logic and emotion still swinging right now? Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.